Morning. Thank you, Chase, for that music. That was wonderful. I appreciate that. For the last 6 months, I've been speaking on the 6 principles and using stories from the Christian New Testament. And so today we're going to take a little bit of a detour and look into another source for inspiration, for ideas this morning. We're looking at the Kina Upanishads, the Hindu texts, for inspiration this morning for the message. And I found this passage in a book that Melinda Allen suggested to us a while ago, God Makes the Rivers to Flow. And basically what the book is a collection of writings from all faiths, from all different sides, all different faiths. And what you come away with finally is you say, we're all saying the same thing. We're using different words and we're all saying the same thing. We're all looking for the same thing and finding, whether we call it the self, whether we call it God, whether we call it the divine, the one, we're saying the same thing and just using some different words once in a while. The title of the Upanishad that we're looking at this morning is That Invisible One. It is one of the Kina Upanishads, which is the oldest group of writings. The word Upanishad means to sit at the feet of. To sit at the feet of. It's kind of a learning posture. So it suggests that we're going to listen. We're going to learn some things. And the one that I've chosen this morning has an interesting back and interaction between the student and the teacher. The student asks the teacher some questions, and the teacher replies to the student's questions, sometimes in ways that the student expects, and sometimes goes beyond what the student may have been thinking the answer might be. And so we're going to look at that interaction between the student and the teacher. The student, of course, is excited. He's got some time alone with his teacher. He's got some time alone to be just with him and be able to ask him questions. If any of us have had spiritual mentors in the past, those times that we've been able to be alone with them, to have extended time alone with them and ask them questions, to spend time talking to them, it's an exciting time, it's a affirming time, and something that we look forward to. And so this student is naturally excited because he's with his teacher. He's alone with his teacher and able to ask some questions. I kind of picture them walking on a path in the early morning, just heading towards wherever they might be. And the student finally looks at his teacher and he asks his question. And the Upanishad starts saying, the student inquires, who makes my mind think? Who gives vitality to my body? Who causes my tongue to speak? Who is that invisible one who sees through my eyes and hears through my ears? Wow. If you're the teacher, it's like, that's a lot of questions on our morning walk this morning. You came prepared. You came prepared. And so that the student is excited. He's getting to share these. And you can tell from the nature of these questions that this relationship between the student and the teacher has been there for a while. Normally, if I'm new in this kind of setting, I'm asking questions, how do I do this? How do I do that? Because I want to learn how to fit in. I want to learn where I belong in this relationship, in this new experience that I'm going to have. How do I do this? And the student has obviously moved past that. He's listened to the teacher talk. Maybe he's been cogitating on what the teacher has already said to him. And he's come up with some deeper questions. He's come up with some deeper questions to ask him, other than just, how do I do this or how do I do that? He says, who makes my mind think? Over the time that he spent with his teacher, he's probably spent some time sitting by himself and watching the thoughts go through his mind. Sometimes they've been wonderfully inspiring because he's listened to the teacher speak and he's read some of the things that the teacher has suggested. And so his thoughts drift toward those inspired thoughts, towards those things. Other times his thoughts may run amok, going all kinds of ways in all kinds of directions that he just not sure they were supposed to be going. And he's not sure, certainly not going to tell his teacher about the way that he's been thinking all the time. And so he's curious. Who makes that happen? Who makes that happen? Who makes my mind think? I don't feel like I'm doing it. Something else is making that happen. And he says, who brings vitality to my life? And he looks at himself, he looks at his body, and he realizes, I breathe, and I don't think about it. I eat food, and it is converted into energy that keeps me going through the day. And I don't think about it. I don't have to think about it. And so there's a sense of wonder about the body, about the fact that most of what keeps me walking and going through the day, I have no thought. I don't have to give any thought to. It just happens. Who does that? Who does that for me? And then he goes on to say, who causes my tongue to speak? An unwieldy tool it can be sometimes, the tongue. There are times, I'm sure, when he sat with his teacher and he's spoken and he's found himself saying things that were more profound than he realized. He's learning, and he doesn't realize what he's learning until he starts saying and talking to his teacher about those things that they've been discussing. And then there's other times where he finds his tongue going off in places he never expected it to go. Maybe without giving much thought to what he was saying, he finds these words come tumbling out of his mouth, and he wasn't sure he wanted to say those things. And so, yeah. I take it by the laughter, we all have been there. So he's wondering, what causes that? Who causes that? Who makes that possible? And then he says, who is that invisible one? Who is that invisible one that sees through my eyes and hears through my ears? Again, he sees himself. He sees his ability to look around, to hear, to see, perceive through this gift. And he's in a sense of awe, a sense of wonder about the gifts that he has. And then he also looks and he says, you know, sometimes when I look and I see things, and I look and I hear things, they're not the same things that the guy next to me is seeing and hearing. Even though we're looking at the same thing and hearing the same sounds, they don't see it the way I do. They don't hear it the way I do. Who makes that happen? Who makes that possible? And so he has these questions that are perplexing him, and he's laying it out before his teacher. And his teacher smiles at the questions. Sometimes the student doesn't like that the teacher smiles. He's sure he maybe had him stumped a little bit anyway. But the teacher smiles because he's been there. The teacher has been a student before, and he's been there. He knows what's going on inside this student's mind. He sees the wheels turning and the questions coming up. He sees a couple of things. He sees curiosity, and he wants to reward that curiosity. He wants to engage that curiosity and encourage the thinking to continue, the questions to continue. And he also sees a little bit of maybe shifting away from being responsible for all those things that are happening, looking for somebody else to put responsibility on for the things that are going on in his life. So he sees both of these, and he structures his response, his reply to the teacher, to the student, to answer both of those aspects that he sees in the student. And so he starts off and he says, the teacher replies, the self is the ear of the ear, the eye of the eye, the mind of the mind, the word of words, and the life of life. In one blanket statement, he says, the self is at once the source and the expression of all that we are and all that we do and everything that we know. The self. And the teacher looks at the student and he can see the wheels turning. He can see the wheels turning. He said, oh, I've got a new idea now. I've got an idea. The self, okay. How do I picture this self? How do I give form? How do I bring this idea of the self into my consciousness? How do I process it. What do I do? And the teacher, of course, is smiling because he's been there, and he knows all the questions and all the forming, all the mind things that are going on now as a result of the answer that he's provided to the student. And he knows that the student is probably trying to form a picture, a definite picture of who that self is, so he can have something to hang on to, have something to hold on to, that this is the self. And the teacher is wise, and the teacher loves the student, and he realizes, I can't leave him there. I can't leave him there, because if he holds on to that one picture and holds on to that all the time, he'll always be limited in his ability to realize the self. So I need to go on. I need to go on and continue to explain what the answers to his questions are. So he says the self is the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the word of words, and the life of life, rising above all senses and the mind, and renouncing separate existence. The wise realize the self. And so here he's calling the student to come out into deeper waters, to look beyond those things that he's relied on in the past, to realize what life is about, who the self might be, who the source of this life might be. Because the student is used to using his senses to figure things out. Most people, at some time or other, have this feeling that they associate with the divine, with God, with the self. They say, that is God. That is when I'm close to God. That feeling is it. And what the teacher is saying is, to really know the self, we need to rise above those senses that we've been counting on, those senses that we've been relying on, going beyond those things to know the self, going beyond those things. And the teacher and the student, of course, he's a good student. He's willing and he's wanting to learn, but he's getting real challenged right now, because these are things that he's been relying on for a long time. These are things that he's been using as tools to get through for a long time. And then he says, rising above the mind. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm a student. Aren't I supposed to be learning here? Aren't I supposed to be coming to know certain things? Isn't this all about making my mind better so that I can know the self? And of course, the teacher knows, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. It's okay. Rising above the senses and the mind and renouncing separate existence. Okay, the self is the eye of the eye. And yet there's no difference between me and the self. There's no separate existence of me and the self. And here is the challenge for the student. The challenge to see that differently than he's seen it before. To see that oneness. We call it divine, we call it God, whatever the self, whatever, we are one with that. There is no separate existence for that. And again, the teacher sees the student and he's trying to learn, he's trying to pick this up, he's trying to get through this, to move beyond to where the teacher is trying to take him. And the teacher understands that, and he doesn't let up. He doesn't let up. He continues his answer, because the student, again, is still trying to rely on some old tools. He's still trying to go down some avenues that he's used to get back to his equilibrium, to get back to that place where he's comfortable and saying, okay, I know. And the teacher is trying to take him to a place where that's not the case. And so the teacher continues, the self our eyes cannot see. The self our words cannot express. The self cannot be grasped, even by our mind. And now, the humility that the student is being brought to, the awareness that he's being brought to say, I can't see the self. I came here to learn about this. I came here to study, to be shown so that I could see the self, so that I could see what God is all about, what this life is all about. Now you're saying I can't see it. I came here to know these things. I came here to be able to say to others, to be a teacher someday, and say to others, this is what, and now you're saying I can't know? I can't say it with my own words. My mind can't grasp this whole idea of the self. And so again, the spinning is going on, and the student is trying to figure out, where am I going with this? I'm giving up all these things. I'm giving up my reliance on my senses. I'm giving up my reliance on my mind. What is going to be left? What is going to be left? And there's some fear, and there's some trepidation in the student. And again, the teacher knows that. The teacher knows that. He's been through this. He's been down this trail. And so he continues to talk to the student. He continues to tell him more about who the self is. And he says, we do not know. We cannot understand, because the self is different from the known. We do not know. We cannot understand, because the self is different from the known. And here the door closes. The student is left realizing, I can't know. I can spend all my time studying and wanting to learn and all this, and eventually I'm going to discover I don't know, and I can't know the self. I can't know. I can't grasp that with my mind. I can't know that. It's unknowable. And the frustration that the student must be feeling as he lets go of these things that he's been relying on, these things that he's been going through his life counting on to make him feel like he knows what's going on, that he can operate and function in this world because I know certain things. I take for granted certain things. This is how this happens, this is how that happens. And all of that is being challenged. All of that is being tossed out the window, or he's being invited to toss it out the window. And again, being a good student, he's trying. He's trying to let that go. And it will be something that he'll have to work on repeatedly, over and over again, if he's anything like an average student. And so he says, because the self is other than what is known, is different from the known. So all those things that we know, all those things that we think we know, within all that, we cannot find the self. We cannot find God. And so the student again, but he says, he rallies. He says, wait. If I can't find the self in what is known, can't I go beyond what is known? Can I use imagination to come up with a picture? Can I use imagination and find the self in that? And the teacher smiles. And he continues to say, because the self is different from the known, and the self is different from the unknown. The self is different from the known, and the self is different from the unknown. And so there he is, nowhere to go. He's brought to that place where the teacher wanted him to be. That place, that silent wonder of mystery. The silent wonder of mystery. In that place, in that silent place of wonder, of mystery, where I don't know. I don't know. But I know. And I live, and I love. And somehow it works. There is a spirit, there is a beingness about life that works. And the student comes to that place finally and briefly realizes that silent mystery. Okay. And he looks at his teacher, and the teacher looks at his student, and all of a sudden the student feels very different from his teacher. He feels very different because the teacher has known this. The teacher has shared with him these ideas. The teacher has brought to him all these new ideas and this new way of looking at life. And he feels different than the teacher. And the teacher smiles because he knows what's going on. And the last line that he tells him before the poetry, the last line he says, "Thus have we heard from the illumined ones." Thus have we heard from the illumined ones. In other words, I'm a student too. I'm a student too. I come to you as a student. I have teachers. I live as a student. I learn. I look to others to help me to learn. And then at that point, the student and the student, eyes meet, and they are one. And so the teacher has brought the student to where he is, a student as well. And that is the place where we can know the greatest power, the greatest freedom in our lives is in that place where we don't know, where we're just there in silent wonder, in mystery, giving up because the mind again will go up back and forth and try again. Wait a minute, you haven't talked about this yet. Maybe it's over here. Maybe if I go over here, I'll figure this out. Somehow I'm going to figure this out, because that place of mystery can be an uncomfortable place. It can be an awkward place because I don't know all that's there. I don't know all that might happen. And so it can be a place that we feel somewhat awkward, we feel somewhat out of place. And it's only through the practice of living in that mystery, the practice of living in that silent wonder, that we find the ability to live there more and more. And like the student, our minds will race over and we'll find words that are going out that we didn't count on, and we'll find our minds going places that we didn't think they were going to go. And we'll figure out, man, have I made any progress? Have I? And we'll just keep going forward and learning where it is, that place of wonder. And now the Upanishad finishes with 5 verses of poetry. Again, restating what's already been said in another way, in verse. And rather than read them and comment on what they are, what I thought I'd like to do is just recite them, have everyone sit back. If you'd like to close your eyes, you may, but just sit back, relax, comfortable, and then recite the 5 verses that happen at the end of this Upanishad, and just sit in the quietness of that reverie for some time. I'll close it with an amen, and then if we would, just move silently to the next part of the service, and the music and the offering. So if you just get comfortable any way you want to. That which causes the tongue to speak, but cannot be spoken by the tongue, know that as the self. This self is not someone other than you. That which causes our minds to think, but cannot be thought by the mind, that is the self indeed. This self is not someone other than you. That which causes the eye to see, but cannot be seen by the eye, that is the self indeed. This self is not someone other than you. That which causes the ear to hear, but cannot be heard by the ear, that is the self indeed. This self is not someone other than you. That which makes you draw breath, but cannot be drawn by your breath, that is the self indeed. This self is not someone other than you. myself is not someone other than you. Amen.